I'm leaving you and moving to Palm Springs with my 25-year-old boyfriend. I'm taking all our money with me. That was the message. No lead-in, no softening blow. Just a text sitting there on my phone screen, glowing in the dark cabin of my bunk at 3:07 a.m. local time. My hands were still slick with rig grease. I'd just come off a 14-hour shift on a floating oil platform in the middle of the Persian Gulf. The generators hummed. The metal frame of the bed creaked beneath me as I sat down, boots still laced, sweat stiffening the collar of my shirt. A second message came in. A screenshot. Our joint savings account. Balance. 000. The figure should have read $142,000. She added a kiss emoji at the end like it was a prank, like she was proud of herself. I didn't throw the phone, didn't punch a wall. I just stared. At the message, at the digits, at the little heart-eyed yellow face smirking back at me like a dare. 18 years. That's how long Krista and I had been married. That account held every bonus I'd banked for the last 5 years. Every lonely rotation I'd spent on rigs from Kazakhstan to Cameroon. Every holiday missed. Every birthday passed with a satellite call and a promise to make it up next time. Gone. I leaned back on the bed. My bunkmate snored in the cot above me. I could hear the sea slapping against the base of the rig. Same rhythm as always. Everything in the world still turning like nothing had happened. I typed 2 words. Sure, good luck. I didn't even look at the screen after hitting send. Just turned the phone off, stood up and walked barefoot across the cold metal floor to the shower stall, hot water, steam. I watched the grit rinse off my arms and swirl down the drain. Somewhere across the world, she was probably lying in our bed next to him, dreaming of palm trees. I toweled off, got dressed. Tomorrow would come like any other shift. And Krista? She'd never know just how wrong she was about who she was leaving behind. I didn't sleep that night, just lay there listening to the soft groan of the rig's hull against the waves and the occasional metallic clatter of shifting pipes above. Around 5 a.m., when the eastern sky had barely begun to pale, I opened my laptop and sent one short mail. Activate protocol winter. No explanation, no pleasantries. Brendan and I had prepared for this years ago, not because we expected it, but because we'd seen what could happen when men like us assumed stability would last forever. Protocol. Winter was our code for a full-scale legal lockdown. He would begin pulling financial logs, scanning for anomalies, flagging assets, and freezing anything that could still be saved. By 5:08 a.m., his reply came, already in motion. Do not respond to her or any bank until you're back stateside. Shut the laptop and went out for the morning briefing like nothing had changed. The rest of the crew was none the wiser, and I kept it that way. 2 weeks remained on my rotation. I worked every one of those days like I always had, head down, hands calloused, keeping men alive in a place where mistakes get buried at sea. There was dignity in that. Stability, not like back home where the ground had shifted under me quietly and deliberately until it gave way. During those long hours, I started to see it not as an explosion, but an erosion. Krista hadn't left. Suddenly, she'd been loosening the bricks in our foundation for years. Still, part of me wanted to believe there was a misunderstanding, that some of this could be explained. But the number in our joint account said otherwise, and I knew Brendan. If he was moving already, it meant there was more to find. I just didn't know yet how deep the rot had spread. We met at a fishing supply store in Odessa. Krista was behind the counter, making sarcastic jokes about clueless city boys trying to reel in base with neon lures. I liked her immediately, quick with words, even quicker with a smile. I was 33 then, already a decade into the oil life, home between rotations. She was 31 and full of opinions. 11 months later, we were married. Fast, maybe, but it felt solid at the time. Back then I had a plan. I owned my house outright, had savings from a lucky early investment, and a solid income stream from international rigs. She said she admired my consistency. She called it rare, said she wanted to build a future on something stable. But stability can look a lot like absence if you're not the one boarding flights every 2 months. The first few years were fine. We made it work. Calls, letters, long weekends. I made sure she had everything she needed. House repairs, a newer car, money always in the account. We were building something. But around year 12, I started noticing the slow drift. Not all at once, just a string of subtle withdrawals, not from the bank but from the marriage. Our calls shortened. Holidays started without me. She stopped asking when I'd be back, and when I did come home, the house was quieter. She'd say she was tired, that her schedule was packed. I assumed it was just the long arc of marriage settling into something quieter. I didn't push. Maybe I should have. 2 months before that final text, she'd stopped answering my calls altogether. Just short replies over text. Busy. With friends. Yoga retreat. I almost flew home early once, but I didn't want to seem paranoid. I convinced myself to trust her. 18 years earns you that, doesn't it? I didn't realize I was living in the house of cards she'd already started folding away. All the moments I chalked up to fatigue, distance, or routine, they were exits, and she'd been quietly walking through them for over a year. Brendan called me 2 days after I sent the code phrase. His voice was clipped, professional, the way he gets when he's found something ugly buried in numbers. She didn't just drain the joint account, he said. She's been siphoning money for over a year, quietly, systematically. He walked me through it. Transfers from our savings to an account in her maiden name. It started small, a couple thousand every few weeks, but over the past 90 days the amounts had ballooned. 20,000 here, 15 there. Altogether, more than 200 grand had vanished. That's not all, Brendan continued. She took out a home equity loan 6 months ago. 40,000. You didn't sign off on it, Miles. I pulled the document, it's forged. Your name, your signature, but not your hand. I sat in silence, staring out at the flat shimmer of the sea beyond the rig. The horizon looked calm. Deceptively so. She also changed your life insurance beneficiary back in January, Brendan added. You're no longer listed. It's been switched to her, and the timing matches exactly when those big transfers started. The ground didn't shift beneath me. The sky didn't fall. I just felt something peel away. Like a mask I'd never realized she wore. She wasn't just leaving, I said finally. She was erasing me, preparing to disappear. Yeah, Brendan replied quietly. It's worse than I thought. I thought about the birthdays she missed, the trips she said were wellness retreats, the cash withdrawals labeled home repairs, lies, all of them. Not dramatic ones, just enough to slide under the radar of a man exhausted from work and trusting out of habit. Krista hadn't changed overnight. She'd evolved the way rust eats a pipe, slow, invisible, internal. She'd known exactly how to play it. Wait until I was overseas, file the papers, drain the accounts, and vanish. But she'd made one miscalculation. Brendan and I had seen something like this before. We'd learned from it, and we'd prepared for this exact possibility. Years ago, when trust was still whole. Now it was time to use what we built. Devon Forrester. The name meant nothing to me at first. Brendan found it after tracing some of Krista's larger transfers. One of them had gone directly into a business account tied to a gym in Austin, registered under a name I'd never heard. But Devon's name wasn't new to the state of Texas. 3 women, all in their 40s or 50s, all recently divorced. Each of them had entered into a relationship with Devon within weeks of their separation, and each one had ended up financially wrecked, credit destroyed, savings gone. One had filed a police report for fraud. Another was still in litigation trying to reclaim her retirement fund. And then there was the third. Her ex-husband died in a car accident 6 weeks after their divorce was finalized. Wet roads. Late at night. A familiar road the man had driven. For 2 decades. No charges were filed. No witnesses. But a few lines in the police report raised flags. Inconsistencies in timing. An unanswered call to 911 that pinged Devon's cell tower minutes before the crash. Circumstantial. Unprovable. But not invisible. Brendan pulled up a photo of him. Clean cut, boyish charm, personal trainer smile, the kind of man who looked like romantic rebound in a vacation town brochure. He's a pattern, Brendan said, not a person, and Krista's following it step by step. I looked at the man in the photo, wearing designer sunglasses and holding a protein shake outside. Some strip mall gym in Tempe. This was who she traded me for. Not just me, our life, our home, our history. Not because he was better, but because he was new, flashy, fast-talking. The kind of man who knew how to make women feel young again. Until the money dried up, and Krista, she was pouring everything into this, selling the house, erasing me, hitching her future to a man with no past worth claiming. She thought she'd run off into a perfect ending. She had no idea her final chapter had already been written, and I was the one holding the pen. It started with an iCloud backup. When Krista got a new phone last year, she hadn't bothered setting up her own Apple ID. She'd used mine, the same account we'd once shared when she wanted to sync playlists and photos, back when sharing meant something. She never changed the password, and everything, every photo, every message, every whisper in digital ink, had been syncing quietly ever since. Brendan discovered it first. He called at midnight. You need to log in. Now. I sat in his guest room, opened my laptop, and signed into the iCloud dashboard. Messages poured in, cascading across the screen like spilled gasoline. They weren't just talking about vacations or real estate. They were planning how to take me out of the equation. One message stood out. Krista. Bank froze the transfer. Miles has to verify in person. What do we do? Devin. Tell him your mom's in the hospital. Get him to call the bank. He's still your husband. Play the part. Krista. He's not answering. Devin. Try harder. We need that money. Before closing, or we look at Plan B. Krista. I don't like Plan B. Devin. It's just insurance. He works a dangerous job for a reason. Accidents happen. I stared at the screen, letting the words settle like ash. This wasn't just betrayal. This was calculation. Intent. They weren't just trying to ruin me financially. They were weighing the odds of whether my death could solve their problems. The job I'd worked to build our life, the very rig that left me unreachable for weeks, had become the weapon they were too cowardly to wield directly. But they were willing to wait for the fall. Bet on a freak chain reaction, a dropped tool, a broken cable, one mistake. And if that didn't happen, they were talking about creating the emergency themselves. I didn't feel panic, not even anger, just clarity. They had crossed a line, one I hadn't even known I'd drawn. Now it wasn't just about money. It wasn't about divorce. It was about survival. And I never lost a fight I prepared for. I landed in Houston just after midnight. Brendan met me at the gate with a burner phone and a folder thick with documents. My regular phone was still turned. As far as Krista knew, I was still on the rig, unreachable, unaware, and fully outplayed. She had no idea the real game had just started. We drove straight to Thomas's office, my attorney. A quiet man with eyes that missed nothing, Thomas had drawn up contingency protocols years ago. Standard legal paranoia for offshore workers with assets worth protecting. Now we were enacting them. First things first, he said, sliding over the paperwork. Emergency freeze on all joint accounts and liquid assets, already filed. Next, criminal complaint for the forged home equity loan. That one's ironclad. He clicked his pen. We're also filing a motion to challenge spousal support based on fraud and conspiracy. And we've subpoenaed her phone records. Once those texts are admissible, this becomes something else entirely. I nodded, flipping through the file as he spoke. A quiet kind of satisfaction settled over me. Not vengeance. Precision. A scalpel to the rot. Krista had filed a domestic abuse claim that morning, apparently trying to get a restraining order. As a preemptive move, claimed she felt unsafe, that I was controlling, that I withheld finances. She forgot I'd been 6,000 miles away for 7 weeks. Thomas handed me another document. We're filing a countersuit. False claim of abuse is perjury, and it undermines real victims. We're not letting her use the system as a weapon. I signed everything without flinching. Krista, meanwhile, was panicking. While we worked through the legal motions, her texts were coming faster, to the number she didn't know I'd abandoned. Pleading, angry, confused. She'd even called the bank trying to get access to the frozen account. Standard fraud prevention locked her out. She didn't realize the system she tried to game had already closed behind her. I wasn't going to respond. Let her feel it. The silence, the stalling, the realization that she was no longer moving pieces. On the board, she was one of them. Brendan had set up a temporary safe house for me. Just a rental unit near downtown Houston with no listed name, no shared Wi-Fi, and blackout curtains. Paranoia? Maybe. But after reading those messages about Plan B, paranoia felt a lot like survival. I powered up my laptop and logged into the system Krista had forgotten. The home surveillance I'd installed 3 years earlier after a break-in. On our block. She'd never bothered to disable it, assuming I couldn't access it from 6,000 miles away. She didn't know I was already back. The first feed loaded. The living room. Devin was on my couch, wearing my college sweatshirt, sipping from a bottle of my best whiskey. My name, stitched in silver thread on the sleeve, caught the light as he laughed into a phone call, probably making jokes about old Miles still sweating offshore. The second feed was the kitchen. Krista paced in and out of frame, her hair tied back in a way she only did when stressed. She was barefoot, phone in hand, snapping at someone. Maybe the bank, maybe her lawyer. Her face had that familiar mix of control and desperation she wore whenever something slipped through her fingers. Boxes were stacked in the hallway, labels scrawled in her handwriting, master bath, kitchenware, office files. They were packing to vanish. Everything about that house, the walls I'd painted, the garden I'd built, the furniture my grandfather left me, it all felt like theater now. A stage I had paid for, rehearsed in, and been written out of. Brendan walked in holding 2 coffees. I didn't look up. "She still think you're overseas?" he asked. I nodded. Completely. "You want to reappear?" I didn't answer at first. I just watched the feed. Krista now hugging Devin, whispering something in his ear. He smiled, smug, as if he'd already won. Then I looked up at Brendan. "Not yet," I said quietly. "I want them to keep thinking I'm gone. Because when the curtain finally lifts, I want them both on stage." At 8:57 a.m., 2 sheriff's cruisers rolled to a stop in front of my house, our house, the one I'd paid off in full before our 10th anniversary. The moving truck was already there, idling in the driveway. Krista had rented it under a fake last name. Devin was shirtless, dragging out the last box labeled bedroom. From across the street, inside Harold's front room, I watched it unfold through the blinds, coffee in hand. The deputies approached the door while a third figure emerged from the unmarked car behind them, a court officer in a navy suit carrying a padded briefcase. It was time. I stepped out from Harold's side door and crossed the street slowly. Krista answered the knock with the smug, composed expression of a woman who thought she'd won. That expression cracked when she spotted the badges. Then she saw me. She froze, mouth slightly open. "Miles," she said, barely audible. I stepped into full view, the morning sun framing my shoulders. "Surprise," I said. Devin appeared behind her, confused. His eyes bounced from the deputies to me, then to the documents being handed to Krista. "Mrs. Harrington," the court officer began, "you are being served with a restraining order, a criminal complaint for financial fraud and forgery, a cease and desist order halting the sale of this property, and notice of divorce proceedings citing conspiracy and malicious intent." Her hand trembled as she took the documents. Devin took a step forward. "You can't just show up like this," he blurted. "She's scared of you." "We have a domestic." "Dismissed an hour ago," I interrupted. The judge reviewed the security footage, location records, and every forged signature she filed while I was on the other side of the planet. The deputies said nothing. They didn't need to. Krista opened her mouth to protest, to spin another lie, but her voice caught in her throat. The court officer cleared her throat. "You have 30 minutes to gather personal items, no valuables, no heirlooms. The rest remains for court inventory." As they turned inside, I stepped back and exhaled. This wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. 3 weeks later, I sat across from Krista in court for the first and last time. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her carefully curated image, pearls, blazer, practiced stillness, crumbled under the fluorescent lights of courtroom 3B. Devon wasn't present. He'd disappeared 2 days after being served. A familiar pattern, according to Brendan's file. The judge, a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back in a braid, didn't waste time on sentiment. She read through the filings with methodical precision. Wire transfers, forged documents, hidden accounts. The text messages between Krista and Devon, including the one about my life insurance, were printed in color and stapled to the criminal complaint. "Mrs. Harrington," the judge said at one point, "are you aware that conspiring to alter beneficiary designations without consent constitutes insurance fraud? And that planning to extract life insurance payouts under false pretenses could, in certain contexts, be interpreted as attempted criminal conspiracy?" Krista stammered something about jokes taken out of context. Her lawyer fumbled to intervene, but the judge raised a hand. "This court will not tolerate manipulation of the law for personal gain." Then she turned to me. "Mr. Harrington, your offshore trust, Winterlight Holdings, was disclosed in full, including tax records, prior to this hearing. You made no attempts to hide or misappropriate assets during your marriage. All documentation shows your financial behavior was above board and precautionary, not evasive." I said nothing, just nodded once. The judgment came down swiftly. All assets Krista moved fraudulently were to be returned. The home remained mine alone. Her claims for spousal support were denied in full. The forged listing agreement was nullified. The judge referred the insurance-related materials to the district attorney's office for review. Krista's expression flickered between disbelief and horror as the rulings sank in. When it ended, she tried to approach me outside the courtroom, maybe to apologize, maybe to plead. I didn't stop walking. I didn't need her reasons, her regrets, or her voice in my ears ever again. Some betrayals don't deserve closure. They deserve consequence, and this, finally, was consequence delivered. 6 months later, I stood at the edge of my land in Montana, the first frost dusting the pines like powdered sugar on an untouched cake. 40 acres of silence, of peace. I'd bought the property years ago under Winterlight Holdings, a trust named after my grandmother's maiden name and the stream that ran through the back edge of our family's land when I was a boy. Krista. Never knew it existed. Now it was home. The cabin wasn't large. 2 bedrooms, a deep porch, a stone fireplace I laid myself. No flashy marble countertops or imported tiles, just clean lines and warm wood. Brendan came up once to help me wire the satellite internet, but otherwise I built most of it alone during those early weeks when my hands needed to work faster than my thoughts. The holding company's purpose had been simple, to protect the parts of myself I couldn't afford to lose. The assets were never hidden, just removed from reach, declared, taxed, and quietly waiting. Now, its final job was done. That morning I signed the papers to dissolve Winterlight Holdings. Brendan handled the closing details. Every penny had served its purpose, every document. Proof that planning wasn't just caution. It was survival. I'd declined every interview request, every curious call from journalists once the court filings became public record. Let Krista spin whatever story she needed to preserve her dignity. I had no interest in humiliating her. Further, the law had spoken. My silence said the rest. The cabin had no framed wedding photos, no reminders of the life I used to live. But in the corner of my office was an old cigar box holding a single item, my father's watch. She'd tried to pack it for her new life, but it found its way home. That, to me, was everything. Legacy, protected, sanity, preserved, and freedom. Finally, fully earned. The air in Montana has a particular stillness at dusk. It's not quiet exactly. There's the rustle of pine needles, the occasional call of a bird, but it's the kind of calm that settles into your chest and stays there. I sat on the porch swing I'd built last summer, bourbon in hand, watching the shadows stretch across the valley like long, tired arms reaching for rest. No one was expecting anything from me anymore. No crew waiting for instructions. No lawyer needing signatures. No wife pretending to miss me while planning my erasure. Just the wind and the weightlessness that comes when you've finally laid everything down. 6 months had passed since the hearing. Krista pled out, 5 years probation, restitution payments she'll never complete, and a permanent stain on her record. Devin disappeared again, just like Brendan predicted. His newest partner would learn too late. Some men move like shadows, always slipping forward before the damage catches up behind them. Me, I stayed still. For the first time in decades. Planted a row of firs behind the cabin, refinished an old rocking chair from the Odessa house, built shelves in the den, lined them with paperbacks I'd collected from airports over 27 years. One afternoon, Harold shipped up the last of my father's tools, said it didn't feel right keeping them in storage. I opened the box slowly, the scent of aged pine and oil-stained leather catching in my throat. I wasn't the sentimental type, but when I found the small wooden sign my dad carved the year I bought my first truck, "Earn it, don't owe it," I hung it right over my workshop door. Last week, a new company out of Alberta called. They'd heard about my reputation, quiet, precise, drama-free. Wanted to know if I'd consider consulting, high pay, minimal travel. I told them I'd think about it, but not tonight. Tonight was for the wind and the firelight flickering through the cabin windows. For the hum of peace so deep it felt like a heartbeat. For the memory of the life I nearly lost and the one I built instead. They called me old school. I just called it integrity, and some victories don't need words.